We are looking here at the beginning of my dungeon creation for the dungeon portion of my Frostgrave video set. If you want to see the first video in this series on overland exploration, you can go to the link below. This video is going to focus on the dungeon portion, and pulling back to show you we're in process here and figuring it out. I actually haven't even started playing it yet. I'm working on the sequence of play and possibly using these invisible Overlord cards from Dungeon Saga modified to work with the Frostgrave rules, and just placing tokens and some items and doors and barrels and things like that here, and developing. It's not going to be a party. It is going to be my warband, even though I kind of feel like I want to make it a party of 4. It's not going to be. We're going to be sticking with the warband that I presented in the Overland adventure. As with that other video, what I'm going to do here is the first part of this video is going to be my my dungeon exploration. I'll give an overview of the goals of the game and what's going on, and a very brief overview of explanation of how I'm interacting with the environment, because as with the Overland adventure, here this dungeon is going to be in keeping with the Frostgrave motif. This is a magical place where some of the magic still remains as inherent in some of the objects and some of the rooms of the dungeon, so the environment is going to be having its own phase and interacting with the war bands that are traveling through it and interacting with each other through it. And the second portion, so I will explain that a little bit, but the first portion of the video is going to be the gameplay. The second portion of the video is what I'm calling the DIY part, and this is where I will present to you the notes that I've made, the decisions that I made, some discussion about how I determined what I was going to do, in following with some comments I've had on some of my other videos where people like to see more explicitly just some gameplay, and then more explicitly just some conversation about the building of the homebrew, basically, that I do for so many things that I present on the channel, and that will include a look inside my design notebook and what I did and did not use. This is from the original thing I thought I would do for the last Overland video that I never ended up using, and the beginning of my notes for that, for this dungeon. So part 1, if you're interested in just gameplay, part 2, if you're interested in just DIY stuff, and both parts if you're interested in a combination thereof. And a disclaimer again here for this video, as for the other one, I am going to be using mostly the Frostgrave rules, but there's going to be a lot of tinkering with them, starting with the fact that I'm going to be playing this as a solo. And second, the fact that I'm going to be giving the environment some of the spells to cast upon the war bands within it. So if you are interested in a sort of straight Frostgrave Into the Breeding Pits video, this is not the video for you. If you're interested in a solo homebrew, patching it together kind of thing, this might be the video for you. Despite having more of an appropriate setting for the Into the Breeding Pits, I'm having a harder time getting going here, and I'm not really sure why. I started to fill out the environment. This is that spell from the library before, and so I decided maybe this is the remnants of the library here, and then I started to possibly populate the dungeon with existing characters. You know, I wanted to play it warband versus warband and wizard versus wizard, much as I did the Overland portion, but there's just something about the idea of being in a dungeon, no matter how expansive it is. And I've got something pretty big set up here, at least big for my playing space. It just conceptually is not, I'm not feeling the concept of just 2 war bands in some dungeon. I'm feeling this more as I've got the wizard here, maybe with his minions, but not a full warband, or maybe with some creatures he has summoned to protect certain areas, or I've toyed with the idea of a kind of search and rescue mission where we've got some affiliates of our own warband here who are being imprisoned, perhaps with these magic crystals, and you have to sort of get in and get out with them. I don't know. I'm really surprised at how hard it's been for me to get off the ground since I put this thing together, and I keep adding things to it, like some of these characters, but not really getting very far with the story, and that tells me I need to approach it differently. So what I think I'm going to do is go to the grimoire here and look through all the spells I have and see if any of these spells are speaking to me in terms of placing them in the environment, and the aspect of what I did with the Overland, where the environment had the remnants of the magic that was using the spells against me, and seeing if that brings me somewhere closer toward a story, and figuring out how I'm actually going to play this. Let me orient you a little bit as to what's going on. This is the warband of the Necromancer, who I am playing, and there's my wizard here, the same characters from the other video. I've got 2 archers, 2 thugs, an infantryman, and a man-at-arms, and of course my wizard and my apprentice here. They have entered the crypt from the Overland adventure, and when they get down there, they realize that it was a false front, basically, and indeed it is the crypt dungeon, and in fact, the crypt that they really seek is over here, and we'll get a better look at that in a moment. Trying to give you, I can't quite get all the dungeon in here, but what they're facing is a ruin that has some lingering magic in it, and the sites of the magic are represented by 2 things. They're represented by these crystals here. There's one here, 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 and there's one that you can't quite see. These are places where treasures can be traded in, and there are treasures littered around the dungeon, represented by these little tokens here. A little challenging to see. Here's one right there. There are also some random minions of encounters that they're going to have that are just here. And of course, there is the Necromancer and his warband. And so the wizard is here with the, let's see, who he's got in his warband. The same as before. He's got a knight, a treasure hunter, and 2 archers, a thief. And his apprentice is here and currently set up with one of the archers, the knight, and the treasure hunter. What will be happening is we'll be traveling through, we'll be picking, this is basically a treasure gathering game. We are attempting to get as much treasure as we can, get it to the magic places, and see what we get in order to equip ourselves to deal with, once again, this crypt, which is our final destination here, no pun intended, to finally conquer the Necromancer, who is putting his black magic all over the place. As with what I did in the Overland adventure, there are remnants of magic in this land, and these are represented here. You can see a couple of spell cards here. The spell cards represent the fact that when we enter certain rooms, those rooms have remnants of magic that will act upon us, and when we get to that, we'll see how that happens. There's also 1 or 2 off camera here that you can't see. And finally, the doors are meant to suggest an unexplored area of the dungeon, not necessarily an actual door. They cost 2 movement points to travel over, and then once you travel over them, they are removed to indicate that you have already been in that area of the dungeon. The elevated portions of the dungeon, which are a little challenging to see, here's one. There is elevation throughout. These are meant to represent the ruins of the dungeon, and they will be blocking line of sight. If somebody is on an elevation like this guy here, you, let's see. If you're on an elevation, you get a +1 to your shooting roll, and if you are on an elevation and defending, you get a -1 to your defense roll. So that's how the elevations work. If you're on it and you cannot shoot through it, it will block line of sight. So that is that's the basic enough setup, I think, to get a sense of what's happening. This is in essence a dungeon crawl to get to the crypt and defeat the Necromancer once and for all. And before we get going, I just want to give you a little bit of a closer look at what we are facing here in terms of the overall layout of the dungeon. I struggled a little bit with, here's the crypt here at the end. So that is ultimately our end goal. And we can see there's a magical place here that we can trade in some treasures, as well as up here. And as shown before, the one here and here. Now, I did struggle a little bit with how to indicate the exploration, and in the end I just sort of randomly placed these guys. I don't actually even know who that's going to be yet. I'll have to figure that out when I get there, or this fellow who's definitely got some magic, and I haven't quite figured that out. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was these invisible Overlord cards. Comes from Dungeon Saga, as do most of the terrain and dungeon elements you're seeing here. I am going to be using these to dictate, or at least suggest, what my wizard and apprentice are going to do in their turn, and as that comes up, I will show you. So normally there would be an initiative roll, but in this case we're not having an initiative roll. We have arrived, and we need to enter here, and definitely we will be taking the first turn. So at this point the wizard is going to be entering the dungeon, and at a cost of 2 movement points, and assessing the situation. Now again, one of the things that I struggled with here in getting Frostgrave underground, as it were, is the sense that when I'm in a dungeon, it's usually a dungeon crawl with revealed spaces and not the whole thing laid out. And this is how I came to the idea of using the doors that I have to represent exploration or whatever. I mean, obviously I know what's here, I just stuck it down here, but it's going to cost him 2 movement points to get into this room, and then he will be having 4 movement. I'm going to be using, basically, this does not equal 1 inch exactly. I do have a ruler, which I'll be sort of using for movement, but when moving straight ahead, to save myself the trouble, I'm just going to count this as, and say, for example, that would be 3 inches. Moving on the diagonal, I'll use a ruler more or less. Once again, this is an elevation here, if you can see it. So this is going to be, if he needed, for example, line of sight spell, he would not be able to cast that spell here to get rid of this zombie. The wizard has moved in with both of his archers, and now it is the other wizard's turn. The Necromancer hears people coming and knows who they are, so he is going to act. So naturally the first thing he's going to do is try to cast his raise zombie spell. Now, to cast that, he has to roll an 8 or better. The zombie is going to appear in base contact with him, and he's up on this elevation, which I thought was sort of cool, but I actually don't think it really does much. So as his, the first thing he's going to do is move down from here, so that if he does successfully cast it, the zombie's just going to be coming in next to him, and he's got to roll an 8 or better to cast that spell. And once again, I'm having the dice box issue, but we'll see. And he does not. So he fails, and he fails with a 5. He does get a wound on that, and I should have mentioned that he is coming in. Not everybody is at full health here, and in fact that wizard, the Necromancer, was at 10, and now he's down to 9 health with that fail. Some other, one of his archers is slightly wounded, and let's see, on my side, the Chronomaster himself is also down to 10 health, as the apprentice is down to 9. The infantryman is down to 7 from 10. So people have some wounds, and in fact, one of my archers is also only clinging on at a health of 3. So I need to bear that in mind as we move through. In any case, that is what the wizard did initially. Did not work, did not get him a zombie, but he's certainly going to be activating his 2 eligible warband members at this point, which would be the thief with a movement of 7, and the one of his archers as well with a movement of 6. So we're going to have I think we're going to have the thief coming around here and moving out to about here. And we're going to have the, this isn't impassable here without climbing over. So I guess we could do that. 1, 2, 3. So climbing up and climbing down is 2 each. This is just my house rule to keep it simple. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll get the archer out here. He's still blocked from doing anything, but that they clearly need to start spreading out. So that is the wizard's turn, and now we're back to my apprentice, and we're going to do more just basic movement into the first room here. And there is no door. It's already been explored, so maybe he'll have enough. Let's see if he has enough to open the door. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So the apprentice can come. Well, actually, he can't get next to it, so no. So in essence, we're just simply moving into the room here, and this is what we're doing. Actually, he can only take this guy. No, he can take this guy too. I might have made a mistake there, but you guys get the point. And now it is back to here's the apprentice of the Necromancer, and he too is going to, he's kind of stuck there behind a lot of stuff. He's going to just move out. 2, 3, 4. So I think we're just going to start getting these guys moving out. Now here we have, again, this part is impassable. Nothing is passable here except through climbing over it. So I think the archer here is going to definitely want to try to get to a place of elevation so that he could, he can get there. Can't climb up it because he's out of movement, but he can move toward it. And let's see, I think we'll fan out here. This is a goal because this is a place of treasure trading, basically. So we're going to want to get to there, and we'll do that. So that is that, and then the soldier movement. I think I messed that up here because perhaps somebody moved in here, but that's okay. And I think that is the end of this part of it. You'll notice that I did not draw. I mentioned I was going to be using these invisible Overlord cards, or at least attempting to use them, and I've taken all the information from them and mapped it onto what I think it could mean here. Now I got to reshuffle this, and I will be using those. I didn't use them here because there was really no point of contact. But once there has been some combat. All right, I shuffle these back up again. Once there has been some point of contact, I'm going to attempt to use these and see how that works. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go with the most obvious move. So that is the sequence of play, pretty much the Frostgrave sequence of play. The next thing that happens here is any type of activation of the environment, and that would occur if we were in room contact with any of the existing minions or any of the environments that have a spell, but we are not. So this brings us to the second turn of the game where we actually do roll for initiative and see who goes next, who starts the next turn. As with the other video, the Necromancer is going to be the green die here, and I'm going to be something else. For right now, I'm going to be purple, and they're going to be green. We'll roll for initiative, and we will see that we got the initiative. So let me take a look and see what our plans should be right now. Let's walk through some of the options that I have here at the beginning of my first turn, and you'll begin to see how this can be a very rich play experience. Basically, we just walked into this room, and I have to make a correction. Per my house rules, when you enter a new space designated by passing through a door, you need to do a roll on a trap table that I've made up, which says that 20% of the time there will be a trap. For the rooms here that are still imbued with magic, that is only 10% of the time. But for the rest of the dungeon, it's 20%. So I did that roll after the fact, and there was no trap, so I won't forget to do that again. So here we are poised. There was nothing really in the first room because I didn't put a treasure token there. But we see down here, a little off camera, there are 2 treasures waiting here, so I am going to end up splitting the party. I'm going to take my apprentice and probably the... Let's see, my one of my archers is at a low health of 3, and one of my infantrymen also is at 7. I may take them with me with the hope that we'll pick up some sort of potion or something that may aid them and get them back to full health. So I think I'm going to do that with the apprentice move. In terms of my wizard, I'm going to take my wizard in here, and we've got this guy right here is standing up on some ruins, and he is a Gnoll soldier, and we've got a choice here. We could attempt to... We've got this mind control... we've got a mind control spell here, which we could attempt to get him to join our warband. That's one option. And then the other option is we could just try to shoot him out. But he's got a lot of health, so I'm not really sure that we'll take him out with this bone dart. And I think I'm probably going to go for the mind control, although that's going to be a roll of 14 as opposed to a roll of 10. But I'll probably do that with my wizard. The other thing I have that I didn't mention what I got from the last campaign, but we did pick up this grenade spell, which will allow us to lob a grenade into an area, and I'm probably going to end up saving that for this area unless they all spread out. So that is my thought about the wizard. If the wizard casts the mind control, if the wizard fails to cast the mind control spell, I should say, I could attempt bringing in one of my archers with me. I could attempt a shot up at him, and you'll remember, I think I said this somewhere, that when somebody is standing on a ruin, they will have a negative modifier to their fight roll, just as if they're on a ruin and doing a missile or a bow, they'll have a positive. So we're going to, I think this is what we're going to do, and we're going to take the wizard and move the wizard in here. There's a treasure right there. I guess I could have well, that's going to be an action. The wizard's not going to pick it up, so the wizard's going to be moving in here. He could really go anywhere he wants to go, and he needs line of sight to the Gnoll there, which he certainly would have, but let's move in. I think I've got to do all my movement at first. I can't really remember the rules. Bringing in, let me take the right archer. I want to take the non-wounded archer with me, and that's this fellow. So he's coming in, getting ready to possibly take out or damage this Gnoll if need be. And then the third, I'm going to take, let's see, I'm going to take a thug with me, I think. Yes, I'm going to take this thug with me here into this room as my movement, and then I'm going to attempt to cast mind control. I need to be rolling a 14 to do that, and get set up here, see if you can see. Hope for the best here. So we need a 14 to cast this, and we do not get it. We have a 9, and that's going to damage us. We're going to take 1 damage there for that failed attempt, and this is going to bring our health down to 9. So that was unfortunate, and I'm going to have my, let's see, where are we here? Here. I'm going to have my archer take a shot at this point at that Gnoll that's up there. And this Gnoll, I keep referring to him as a soldier. He's a Gnoll thug. He's got a fight of 2, but the elevation is a -2 modifier, so he's not going to have any modifier. And the archer on his shooting is going to have a +2. So we will give it a roll and remind ourselves that we are the purple die and they are the green. So we'll see what the archer can do here, and indeed, he, even without any help, is going to successfully shoot at the Gnoll. Unfortunately, he just does 1 point of damage, but that's what it is. And then this thug, for his second action after moving, is going to come and... Well, he can't pick up the treasure. Actually, I had no... Yeah. he's gonna pick up the treasure next time, but he'll be just moving there to stand on the treasure and get it next time. And that is the activation for the wizard, my wizard, and the Necromancer over there. He's got some choices too, and I think what he's going to do, he's going to try to raise a zombie again. He needs to roll an 8, and let's see if he can do that, because why not? That's what he would try to do. So let's see. He does not. Wow. Doesn't take any damage, but he's not having luck either. And there's nobody else that he can activate who is near him from his warband. So now we move to my Apprentice turn, and as mentioned, my Apprentice is going to be moving into this space here. We'll give you a better look here. It's basically an empty room with a couple of treasures there, and as a reminder, to quote-unquote redeem these treasures, they need to be brought to this magical place here. So we will be picking them up, or moving out and picking them up with I think these fellows right here. This is our wounded archer. And to travel over a ruin is going to be 2 movement points. If you go up on a ruin and stay on a ruin and come back down, it's 2. But if you're just traveling over it, it's 2. So let's see how far we can get here. The archer has a movement of 6. A value of 6. So that's going to cost us 2. So I think we're going to get just over here, basically, with the archer. And ditto, the apprentice movement is same deal. So we're basically slowly moving into this room here. And finally, our thug. Is that the thug? Yep, he's also got the movement of 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He can actually move a little bit closer here. Because they have entered this new room, I now need to do a trap roll. So I will be rolling a D100, and on a 1 to 20, there is going to be a trap in this room. No, 45. No trap. Okay, so there's nothing else really to be done here. We did the movement. I guess we could do half movement to get here, but we don't have enough actions to pick this up, so it hardly matters, but we will do that and just leave these guys hanging out there. Back to the apprentice of the Necromancer, who is standing here. Let's point him out right there. So he can activate this archer, and that is actually, he's got 2 archers with him. He can activate them both. This is a question here. Let's see. Does he have line of sight to this? That's a little bit of a question. I'm going to say no, based sort of center to center. I'm going to say there's no line of sight there. And in fact, actually, never mind, because this blank spot here, I don't know how clearly you can see it, but my desk is through here. That sort of counts as nothing. It's not part of the dungeon. So indeed, he can't do anything but sort of move up and over this ruin if he wants, or maybe even stand on the ruin to try to take a shot at the wizard. He probably would do that. Ditto, the apprentice here is going to move 1, 2, 3, 4. He's going to move up. I think they're both going to move up to the ruins, in fact. And we'll see how how good my construction is. And this is the thief back here. Now, you can see the thief. So the thief, he is going to be, his role really in the opposition is going to be, he's going to be taking these treasures and bringing them to the magical spots if he can. It's not going to be turned in for anything, but it's just going to be, the function is going to be just removing them from my side's ability to get them. That's just the way I'm playing it. The rationale for that is that the other warband has these built-in benefits of these large constructs and the random minions that are here and the magic that's here. So that is in effect the treasures that they get. But this thief, so for his action, I don't know how clearly you can see it. There's a treasure token right there. So for his first action, he's going to move, and for his second action, he's going to pick that up, and then he will be taking it probably to the nearest, whichever the nearest, actually the nearest one, I don't know where the nearest one is, but he'll be taking that and turning it in and basically getting it away from us. And I have to correct something. I failed to remove this door to indicate this was explored, and also I failed to then account for those 2 points. So we'll just move these two back, and this really wouldn't have changed anything that we were attempting to do, but just to tidy things up. Whoops. Just to tidy things up as they're messy. That is that movement. And again, I can't remember now whether I rolled for a trap in this room. It's my apologies. It's difficult when you're filming in bits and pieces to keep track of everything. So I don't know. Maybe I'm doing it twice, but I will, just in case, I'm going to roll now for a trap in this room in case I failed to do that before. And there is no trap. So you can see that, the 47. So we're trap free, and now we just have the rest of the movement of the soldiers here on our side and the soldiers on the other side. And I'll just do this off camera. I'm basically going to be moving, spreading out to equalize the two parts of my warband, and the other soldiers are going to be sort of moving toward us. It's taken them so long to move that night has fallen, and we have our party here. We're going to roll for initiative. The Necromancer wizard is just behind this door here, and we are facing, we've moved into this room hoping to get this treasure and bring it to this hotspot, but we've got the apprentice and the archer lurking in these ruins here above our party, and then down here we have the other part of our party still looking for that treasure. So I'm going to roll for initiative, and one point I wanted to make that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the overall setup here is I am going to use, when combat occurs, I'm going to go with the 2d10 on each side rolls as opposed to the D20. I used the D20 per the Frostgrave rules in my other video, and there's been discussion I've read online about going with 2 D10s to mitigate a little bit the swinginess of that. It is the one aspect of the rule set that is a little frustrating to me because as you know, if you've played this or if you haven't, to say that you can have, just based on a die roll, one roll of the die, very swingy combat and the elimination of a relatively strong character by a relatively weak character in one round. But 2d10s will mitigate it a little bit, not a ton, but I'm going to try that for this video. The other point I want to make is in this video, per the Frostgrave rules, people are going to die. My warbands will be decimated, and that's just the way it's going to go. I had a house rule for the Overland adventure where I made characters unconscious, and I wasn't totally thrilled about the way it worked out. It was okay, but here there's just going to be death. So I'll try to stave that off a little bit, maybe with 2d10s, but I don't know. We'll see. In any case, it is now the initiative turn again, and our focus here is to deal with these two folks here. Now, I do want to point out this zombie that's lurking in the ruins here in the background. There is not a door here, so per what I said for setup, this is kind of an open space. However, he's not going to activate unless we engage with him first. So the house rules that I have for the creatures that live here is that they become activated if you engage with them first. Engaging with them first means that you enter a space that they are clearly in, or you just actively engage in combat with them. So this this troll thug here. I guess I would say that he's just going to sit there. Again, this is a little bit DIY, or a lot DIY, and if I were playing off camera, I would just kind of figure it out and not worry about any ambiguity. Here, I realize now as I'm talking, there's some ambiguity about what room, quote unquote, he is in. Would he be activated here? But right now, he's just decoration. So we're going to roll for initiative. Again, they are the green and we are the purple, and we are coming up where it is their action first. And their wizard is going to just simply be moving in here and what I'm going to do to shorten this video a bit and show you a bit more of my decision making is probably just off camera do this movement. The wizard is basically going to be coming in here and heading toward this area so he can be protecting this treasure somewhat and having some more access to our party. What the wizard needs to do in standing around and looking is to try to deal with the Necromancer's apprentice and the archer there who are lurking in the ruins as the warband enters this room. And he's got two spells that could help. One is Petrify, which he could cast on the opposing apprentice to freeze him and not allow him to do any activation for his next activation, which would also take the archer out of that, at least until the soldier phase. Or the other one is this elemental ball, which he could lob over there and do a +5 shooting attack at both of them. I think, given how I'm rolling the dice, I would rather try this Petrify with a casting cost of 12. So I'm going to move my wizard here, and then I need to deal with the movement of group activation now of these three. What I want to do is, let's see, he could pick up this treasure and start to, that would be one movement and picking up the treasure. So he could do that. And let's see. I think I'm going to have this, think I'm going to have this thug here start to engage with the zombie at the next turn because there's some treasures here and he could go off in that realm. So he's going to move back up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this archer here, I think, is going to get in position to do some shooting across the ruins here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll stick him up here. This guy's got the treasure. And now we're going to attempt to cast this Petrify and hope for the best. Ooh, we did it. We got a 20, and I can't remember if that has significance now or not, but I have to look that up off camera. In any case, that was great, and we have now taken the apprentice out of his activation for the activation that will be coming up. But before we get to that, it's going to be the, well, I guess it would be that. So he's out. It's our now apprentice activation, and our apprentice is over here, as you recall, and they're simply going to be attempting to get this treasure, pick it up, and move out. And I need to refresh my memory as to who I wanted to have holding the treasure. This is an enticing room because it has these two treasure tokens and really not much else. I will say that this skeleton token here, this is almost more for effect. I had thought of causing that to be a possible spell to raise a zombie, but I've left that out. There's just too much going on for me, at least when doing the video. Maybe off camera I would continue with that idea, but it's already a lot to manage. I referred to my notes and am remembering that this is the archer with the low health. I want him to pick up one treasure, and this thug over here, I want him to get the other treasure, and the apprentice really isn't going to be doing too much in this phase. I'll probably start to move him out. I neglected in the other segment, although I've put up a note to correct that, I have a house rule on picking up treasure. And in the regular Frostgrave, when you pick up treasure, you would roll a D20 to see if there was a creature activation. And on a certain number, depending on the scenario, basically, 14, 15, or 16 and up, there would be. Because this dungeon is starting live, as it were, and let me just clarify, these are, it's not there. And we have creatures already in there. I'm not doing that, but I did do my own treasure situation here, key, and I will show you what it is, if I can. I've got a D6 roll when you get to treasure. So what you do is when you get the treasure, you pick it up, you roll on this table to see ultimately what it is, and as you can see, on a roll of 6, it's going to be trapped. It's not actually going to be a treasure. So we will do that and see what this particular treasure is once we get there to picking it up. So my apprentice is going to move 2, 4, 5, 6 out of the way here, and this fellow, I think he's just going to stick around. This guy's going to move and ultimately pick up this treasure, and we will roll for that. So let me get a d6, and we'll see what he's going to get. He got a 1 per my treasure table. That is going to be a potion when it gets turned in, so I'll have to make a note of that. And then this guy's going to move and for his second action pick up this treasure, and we will see what that's going to be. Ah, it's going to be a trap. So I will reorient and show you how the trap works. The first thing that we do is we get rid of this treasure because it's not a treasure, it was a trap, and we place a trap tile down. Now these trap tiles, they have different pictures. These are from Dungeon Saga. The pictures in Dungeon Saga mean something. They don't mean anything here, so I could really choose whatever I want just to signify it's a trap. If you come back into this room, the trap could be sprung again. Now let's see. Well, that's hard to see. I'm going to put this, I'll use this one for video. There we go. We're in a trap, and we're just picking up the rules from Into the Breeding Pits, and we are going to be rolling on this trap table, and it's a D20 roll, and we'll see what we get and refer to the impact of that trap on the poor fellow who has triggered it. Now I'm happy to say it's not my low health archer who triggered it, because that would be bad. So let's see what type of trap was triggered here. It's 10, and that is going to be a time slip. So I will refer to, okay, the target must make a will roll against trap number of 12. If it fails, mark the figure's position on the table with some form of counter, and then remove the figure from the board temporarily out of the game. At each subsequent turn, make another will roll. Well, that stinks. Okay. All right, that's cool. Will roll against a trap number of 12. So let's take a look and remind ourselves what our will modifier is, if any. And this guy is, he's a thug. He's a thug. He's got no will at all. In fact, he has a -1 to his will roll. So we're looking for a 12 here, and whatever we get, we're subtracting 1. Wow, nice, 18. All right, he pulled it out. So he successfully dodged that trap. However, he did not get anything for it. This guy's carrying a potion, and I made a note of that. So I'm going to get rid of this token because they don't really travel well with my figure. So I'm just going to have to remember that he's got a token. Now, one point on the travel. A major modification that I have made to the basic Frostgrave rules is, in the basic rules, when you pick up or are carrying a treasure, your movement is halved and your fight is down by 1. The fight's going to remain down by 1. That makes sense to me. Perhaps you're distracted from your basic fighting prowess by the fact that you're protecting a treasure. The movement by half I am completely eliminating. Why? Well, 2 reasons. One, just game mechanic wise, it was bothersome because I ended up having too many characters just kind of slowly schlepping around the board trying to turn in their treasures. And 2, it doesn't make conceptual sense to me, especially in this case. This guy, we know he's carrying a potion. I don't know how big a potion would have to be to cause your movement value to go down by half. So I've chosen this house rule and implemented it, and perhaps some people won't like it, but that is the way I am using it. So his fight's still going to be down by 1, but his movement's going to remain the same, and his goal now clearly is to get around here and trade this in. He's hoping for some kind of healing potion, but that's, you know, statistically not terribly likely, but he's hoping for something because he is only at 3 health, and this thug who avoided the trap is going to help him out, hopefully, in dealing dealing with anything that may come from the dungeon, and that is clear what their little mini mission is right now. And the next phase are the other soldier phases, which I'm going to do off camera. And I've decided to leave the gameplay here and just give you, pulling back here, just a sense of, again, what's going on. I've got this guy with the treasure, the potion that he's going to try to turn in here. Hopefully it'll be something that will help him with his low health. We have this knoll that a pot shot had been taken at him, and I had forgotten about that due to the way I was filming. So he is now activated and definitely going to be coming down and getting into the mix here. The wizard, the other wizard here, is coming in to protect this area. And we still have the apprentice who's going to be following our party, our warband party, as they attempt to trade in these treasures. We've got also this fellow who thinks he's going to take out this zombie, get this treasure, and bring it over and redeem it. And then, of course, we have the rooms that are the magical remnants of the room. So there's a destructive sphere spell here that is going to be activated when somebody comes in. There is a curse from the witch, and all of these things. Now you can see how that works. It's pretty clear, basically. When someone enters this room, it triggers the spell, and then there is the effect if the spell takes effect. And I've chosen to simply go with the casting cost that's on the card with no other modifiers to enact those spells. And again, I made this dungeon relatively large, and we can see it here, and I populated it with a whole bunch of active minions who are already there, so it gives some flavor. So far, I haven't really pulled in and needed to use these Overlord cards, which come from another game entirely. As mentioned, and this will get a little bit into my discussion, so I won't go into it here, but as mentioned, I had sort of mapped them onto this game just in case I had a situation that was ambiguous. And I guess this is a good transition point to start talking about how the Frostgrave system, which is designed as a two-player skirmish game, can pretty effectively be translated into solo play. Generally speaking, I am not a fan of playing both sides and calling that solo play, because I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about what the opposition is doing. I just want to be faced with the circumstances of them doing it. And that can be challenging when you don't have a built-in AI, as there is not one here. In this case, I think it works because if you choose the other warband with relatively clear little goals for themselves. So for example, I had this thief here. His main mission is to focus on getting the treasure that he can and taking it so that the opposing warband, which is me, cannot have access to it. And things like the knight is going to be your main fighting person, so he's just going to rush into any type of skirmish that presents itself. And of course your wizard will be casting spells and focusing on the opposing wizard and the opposing apprentice, things like that. It makes it pretty easy. There's not a lot of messy management, as I sort of term it. Again, I think having the environment, using the spells to create an environment that will, in essence, have its own action. I'm thinking here of something very similar to, say, Sentinels of the Multiverse, where there's an environment phase. That's kind of how I think about it when I play here. The ditto for populating your space with minions or creatures that live there already, and then they can be activating during the creature phase using the creature activation rules that already exist in the main Frostgrave rule set. The other thing that this kind of rule set gives you is a great deal of flexibility on length. I created this dungeon and made it pretty big, and when I continue to play this off camera, it's going to take me a long time to finish it. And unless I die, of course, I could just die halfway through. I mean, that seems fairly possible. You could obviously create this to be much smaller if you wanted to, with fewer creatures there, fewer rooms, fewer goals, clearer goals, or even you could make it more complex if you had different components. I went with the components that I had and just used them to what I felt was their maximum capacity. And of course, the natural question is, well, why would a solo player who doesn't have a lot of minis even be drawn to something that is a two-player skirmish minis game? And I think for my purposes, really, it has to do with the fact that this provides a structure for working out a DIY kind of scenario with some basic information, more than just basic, obviously, it's an entire game, but it's flexible enough that you can add onto it as you wish. And the fact that, for example, we have the generic stats for various members of the warband, the trickster, the tracker, the infantryman, treasure hunter, etc., you can build on that. It could be built on even more than I did. And I toyed with the idea of mapping onto this some social combat rules that I've talked about in other videos and having a different kind of story where perhaps straight combat wasn't the main focus, but that there were options to do some type of negotiation, conversation, and then if that failed, combat would be the secondary thing. And I think at some point I probably will play that for myself, probably not on video, but there's enough openness to this rule set to allow for it. The one trouble I still have with the rules is the D20 Combat. The simplicity of it is useful because it opens up the experience to things like trying to avoid combat, trying to get treasure, trying to move around. But nevertheless, combat happens, and it happens often, and the swinginess of the D20 is troubling a little bit when you have a situation with a relatively strong character, a strong and healthy character who just kind of gets taken out in one roll of the die by a much weaker stat character and even a character that is weaker in health. And I haven't given it enough thought beyond just saying that I was going with the two D10s. I haven't given it enough thought to figure out how I could modify that a little bit to make me feel slightly better about it. Maybe others have thoughts about that. That is in both of these rule sets really the only thing that gives me great pause. The other point I want to make is that the scenarios here for the two-player setups can be useful just to give you some ideas about how you might create and set up your own story. And of course I can't find them quickly here. Even just thematically, like thinking of, oh, there's a mausoleum, and what could you do to create a story around that if you're not actually using the specific setup here, which is for two-player. The genie in the bottle, in fact, is a good one to model for solo. I didn't talk about this before, but there is this genie that's in essence like a boss monster that follows you around if it comes out of the bottle. So that is something baked into this scenario that is, an AI or a creature that is controlled by the game in some way. So these, again, though basic, they are thematic. Once you say library, at least for me, that creates a whole story in my mind that could be very easily built up from that foundation. Ditto for something called the Living Museum. The fact that there are beasts here that are, you get rules for just things that are called constructs. Again, it allows you a flexibility, a small, medium, or large construct. It allows you a flexibility to both map on some models that you may have lying around to something, and also a story behind it, because a small construct could be anything. So if it's like some type of living doll from the Living Museum, that is one type of story and one type of feel. If you make your construct some type of alien who comes down from outer space, that's something else entirely. So the suggestion here and the stats here are open-ended and flexible enough to allow for many different types of stories. The Into the Breeding Pits, which is what I was using for the dungeon that you just saw, I didn't even touch on many aspects of this, which include, one of the main things are these beast crafter spells that are cast by wizards that in essence transform the wizards into more and more beast-like entities, and the impact of that. I did show you the traps. There are also new treasures here and some new rules about lighting and such. There are also some secret passage rules that I didn't use. So this offers, again, another level of, I don't want to say story, but narrative or thought or feeling that is very different. I struggled at the beginning, as you saw in the video, if you watched that part, with the fact that my expectation when I am in a dungeon is to basically be with 4 members of a party, not an entire war band. And so conceptually, it stumped me a little bit, but and I ended up, you know, as you saw, splitting the party right away, or splitting the war band right away, basically into 2 parties, and one was seeking treasure and one was sort of trying to hold off those minions. And as I play it out off camera, I have a feeling I'm going to just continue along that way, which is of course probably why I'm going to end up dying. Here's a look at the new magic section with the beast crafters and explanation of how the wizards sort of slowly turn into beasts as they advance along this trajectory where they get more and more animal features. So they get the benefits of that, but then it's harder for them to recruit people to their warband. So that is that's a great addition, I think, to this rule set if you follow it in some way. And as a soloist, you could create even an entire story around that, where you had your wizard who was either trying to become a beast master, or maybe you could even do it in reverse and have him somehow trying to rid himself of the attributes that he had attained as a beast master. A couple of new soldiers that I didn't get into because I wasn't doing recruiting, but there is a trap expert that gives you a slight benefit on traps. I modified the trap rules here for my video, as I discussed, because in the way they're written for the 2-player game, they really have to do with springing traps on your enemy, as you would think, but I modified them so it was basically the environment springing traps on you. And of course there are some scenarios here that give you some special rules and things, and I didn't really touch on that at all in my video. I kind of went with a straight dungeon crawl because partially it was based on the minis and the terrain and environment that I had, and partially there was just so much going on that I was already adding into it. So that is a look inside Frostgrave. This 2-player skirmish fantasy minis rule set is excellent for somebody who is a soloist who wants to dip their toes into some DIY work in creating a 1-player experience. There is enough here that you can go off of without having to reinvent the wheel to get yourself going, and particularly if you're in the dungeon crawl, it's very easy to envision a dungeon already populated with creatures that you can encounter, and some goal that you create for yourself to work through to the end.